an item that is a function of the audit, and we're working on getting a better handle on exactly what the treatment is going to be under some of the recent accounting standards.
Others that wish to have the floor? Mayor and Deputy Mayor, of the remaining obligations and assets of the municipality, is the Phoenix Center the biggest albatross, or are there bigger albatrosses around our neck?
I missed the first part of that. In terms of buildings and capital improvements, or just broader issues writ large?
I'm just thinking those that would be perceived as assets but are, obligations, so you can look at it very broadly.
Yeah. I mean, I would say the Phoenix Center is in a class of its own when it comes to that category, which is, I know that there have been people who have spoken of it as an asset, and there are aspects to that structure that are assets if you look at some portion of the structure as a whole. But overall, I would say that the structure as a whole is clearly a liability. And that was the case, frankly, even before this 10-year legal saga and horrible settlement agreement occurred. There were enormous deferred maintenance expenses that the city had and was facing for that structure. And that's true even before it was closed, even before the electrical was stripped, even before there was vandalism to it. And it was true even before this horrible settlement agreement obligated the city to pay $6 million to the previous owners of Ottawa Towers. Now that all of those things have come into play, it's clearly as a whole a liability for the city. And, and of course, part of that is that whereas, 10 years ago, the city could use it for parking, which we have a very serious need for downtown, the city now has no ability to utilize it for parking. A private entity can utilize it for parking as needed, but the city no longer has the ability to use it for public parking. The only remaining aspect to the facility that has any asset potential is the amphitheater on the roof of the parking structure. But even there, it requires an enormous amount of upgrades to really be usable. The deputy mayor talked about ADA compliance and making sure that it has a working elevator for disabled participants or patrons who might visit it. But there are a lot of other upgrades that are needed. And of course, it's always been an awkward arrangement as a public venue, just based on it being raised several stories off street level. So if you think about what public spaces and parks tend to be more amenable to public use, and as a commons area that creates a sense of space and community, a street level public square would generally be much more amenable than a 3-story high space that has a visible physical barrier to public participation. Having to walk up giant flights of stairs, having a giant concrete facade that is not aesthetically pleasing, are not aspects you would generally today design as amenable to a sense of community, a publicly accessible and aesthetically pleasing space.
Other discussion on the Parking Enterprise Fund. Councilman James.
Well, I don't disagree with you, Mayor Grimal, but I do think that, in terms of our city wanting to change and move forward, we have got to stop delaying decisions. And if we really consider that building as being a liability, then we need to be looking at, can the building be sold we need to be looking at what are the options open to us. What we can't do is continue to allow these spaces to sit dormant. You know, we've got community centers that have been closed for 10, 20 years. And we just allow things to sit dormant like, you know, nobody else does this. I'm sorry. Nobody else does this. And we can't continue to do it. So we've got to make a decision. If we think it's too much of a liability for the city to try to maintain, what are the other options? What do they look like? Because we need to talk about it. But what we can't do is just do nothing, pay our bills, and the residents of this city have no access to that building. We're constantly paying for things that we get absolutely nothing out of. And that's a real concern. So just my thoughts on that.
Thank you. Councilman Grimel, Mayor Grimel, and then Councilman Nicholson.
I completely agree with every single word you said.
Well, that was brief.